Oh, and it's yelling at me. It's like, hey, it looks like this broadcast was deleted on Facebook. Can I edit? We're live though. That's the interesting thing. This is now we're going to say remove, and we're just going, yes, delete Facebook, remove, and it wants me to add Facebook back. Okay, sure. Why not? It really, really wants me to have Facebook. All right. With that, we're live. Ask the Podcast Coach for June 26, 2021.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means it's Saturday. It's not Friday. We'll explain that later. It's Saturday. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over there from theaverageguy.tv is the one and only Jim Cullison. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. It's good to be here on Ask the Podcast Coach, and I'm glad that it is Saturday today.
Yes, it was. I traveled this week for the first time in a long time, and I got home and was on. I was convinced yesterday was Saturday.
Yeah, and beyond, like everything in your body said it was Saturday. Like I could not convince you otherwise.
And I went through my typical Saturday morning routine, started going out to Facebook groups and looking for questions and such. And
you set up Clubhouse.
Set up Clubhouse.
And auto tweeted.
Yeah,
that was the first realization. I was looking at my Twitter and I was like, Dave's going to be on Clubhouse or whatever it says. I was like, I wonder if he's got his days mixed up. And so I sent you a note. I sent you a note on Twitter. You obviously didn't see it. And then in Slack, like at 9:20, I get this, hey, are you coming? And I said, hey, isn't today Friday?
Yes. And I looked down and I was like, hey, it is. So not only was it not time for Ask the Podcast Coach, I was late to work. I was like, oh, okay. So that was, it was fun. It happens, but
it does happen. Well, what also happens is coffee. Coffee's which you needed yesterday was a coffee pour.
I needed a coffee pour. Really. That's what I did. And of course that coffee pour is brought to you by your good friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co. If you need a piece of artwork, if you need a logo, if you need a full-blown website, if you need a lead magnet, anything that you want to look super professional, then you got to go over and see Mark at podcastbranding.co. Not only is he an award-winning graphic artist, but he's also a podcaster, and you have no idea what a bonus that is until you work with Mark, because he gets it already. And I'm not just saying this because he's a sponsor. I'm saying it because he's the guy that designed the Ask the Podcast Coach artwork, the School of Podcasting artwork, and the Podcast Rodeo Show artwork. So I know of what I say. I'm not just he's not just a paid sponsor. He's a friend, and he's really, really good. So if you want to look professional, check out Mark over at podcastbranding.co.
Cappuccino, hold the phone. Take me home.
And the one thing I can say, well, let me say this up first. My trip to Dallas, I was in Grapevine, Texas, at the Spark Christian Podcast Conference, or some arrangement of those words. It might have been Spark Podcast Christian. No, it's Christian Podcast Conference. Yeah,
I think you had it right.
Which was in a corner of the NRB, which is the National Religious Broadcasters, or as I call it, old white dudes in suits. Mm-hmm. And that was huge. And even though getting there, and I always do this, I always take the first flight out. Why? Because you never know when there's going to be an issue. And I'm so glad I did that, because the second and third flights were canceled. And what's interesting is when you are freaking out, I've said this before when people have like, I have a launch date and I need to get this done, and you start doing stupid things. Well, I was freaking out because I really needed to get to Dallas, and I'm at the counter going, the guy's like, well, we can put you on this flight. Oh, that's canceled. That's canceled. And I'm like, are any other flights? Like, do you have a window to other airlines? Can you see if other airlines are flying to Dallas? And he kind of very politely looked at me and said, yeah, the storm's going to affect everyone. Like Spirit was like, oh, we'll drive into the thunderstorm. We don't care. So, and I was kind of like, oh yeah, that would make sense. So I did.
Where were you stuck?
I was stuck in Chicago. I went from Cleveland to Chicago, and then Chicago to Dallas was stuck. And I finally got on. I was number 3 in standby for a 7 o'clock flight. So I ended up, my day started at 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it ended about 1 a.m. Central Time or whatever Dallas was. It was a long day. So I say that to say, even with that, in-person events, like hands down, no contest, blow online virtual stuff out of the water. No offense to anyone doing online virtual stuff, but once again, the kind of the lunches I had, the dinners I had far outweighed, because again, like you and I go there, and if they're doing a bunch of like podcasting 101 stuff, we're kind of like, okay. But here's the cool. You ready for like what sounds like a humble brag, but it was just so cool, and I got to tell somebody.
Yeah.
Me and Thomas from authormedia.com. He's like a book guy and publisher, really nice guy, but he's also a podcaster, been podcasting since I think 2005 or 6. And so we're walking into the NRB, and we're kind of just walking around, and there's a white dude in a suit, and he's got some sort of thing. And he says, oh, what are you guys looking for? We're like, oh, do you guys have any podcast stuff going on? Oh, there's a podcast thing in the back corner. So we walk back there, and it's already started. It's kind of a podcasting 101 thing. I think it's how to grow your podcast. And so we walk in, and because we're about, 3 minutes late, we just stand in the back. And all these like people with huge, like the one woman, Tara Lee something, has 75 million downloads after 2 years of doing a podcast. Wow. It's a daily show, but 75 million downloads. Yeah. And the executive producer of Focus on the Family is there as well, Robert Kirkpatrick. And somebody asked Robert like a question about how to grow your podcast. And I was like, well, I can go home now. Because Robert goes, well, if you really want to know how to grow your podcast, you just need to talk to that guy back there. That's Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting. And I was like, all right, I can go home now. That doesn't suck. So that was a fun way to start.
That's nice. Congratulations. That's always nice, right? And did that generate anybody?
It
come
did.
Talk to you? Okay.
Yeah. I was like, well, I can't leave till this thing is over. And I had about 5 people come up and threw a couple of business cards at people, and it was fun. But
good.
But the in the hall stuff, like I have some really interesting ideas for the School of Podcasting that I want to implement going forward, and things of that nature. And it's just fun. And plus, it's the people I saw it's weird because you say last year, but it wasn't last year. It was 2 years ago. But it's the last conference, so that was cool and a lot of fun. And so if you have a chance to go to a in-person conference and it's in the budget and you can handle it, I definitely, it was one of those things where I was like, yeah, this was definitely worth it. And so the other thing I should probably do, Jim, before we go any further, is because this was the Spark Christian Podcast Conference, we need one of these. You guessed it. Invisible Sky Buddy alert. Invisible Sky Buddy alert. Beware. And the thing was interesting. Here's the thing I thought was interesting about this, right? You have one topic, right? Which is, it's the J word, right? Everybody's talking Jesus there.
Right.
And I go into the huge exhibitors area, and a lot of it was like getting older churches to like embrace the digital way of receiving offering, and different lots of books on all this stuff. But there's this giant like old boat, and people are like, oh my gosh, it's the boat. And I'm like, the boat? And there's this thing called The Chosen. And I kept finding this out, that I'm like, apparently not as far into the Christian bubble as I need to be, because people kept saying, well, well, you probably heard, Dr. Steve, Jones. And I'd be like, no. And then somebody else was like, oh, well, you probably heard of, Martha Schminkerton. And I'm like, no. And I was like, it's just every time. And so when somebody said, well, you've watched The Chosen, right? And I'm like, The Chosen? So it just was not going well. But here's the thing about this. The Chosen is a TV show. I'm not sure what channel it's on. I'm sure it's on somewhere. But if you just Google like The Chosen, here's the cool thing about it. It's a different business model. Let me pull up the app since we have nobody in Clubhouse at the moment. And it's the business model that I was like, huh. And so when you go to The Chosen and you go to play something, it will say, well, right now, it's spread the word. The word has been 199,377,620 views, 21, 24, 20. It goes up and up. And when you go to play this, they really want you to watch this on the app because you can then Chromecast it and Applecast it and whatever. But when you first start it for 10 seconds, it's like, hey, this particular view that you're watching has been paid by somebody. Like, this is how it's free. Somebody paid for you to watch this. Would you like to pay it forward? And when you click on it, it's like it defaults to like $150. Like, you could have 100 people watch this for $150. And I'm like, no, we can't. But I'm like, if I slide it all the way to the left, it's 10 people for, I think, $15. So it's this whole pay it forward kind of thing. So and everybody that said, you haven't heard The Chosen, and then everybody, because it was me, said, oh, you need to read how they're doing this. You'll enjoy that almost as much as the content. And so it's actually, the thing I like about it, it's really well acted. And if I was a female, all the disciples are buff. So that's a bonus.
It probably wasn't that way, but they're clean. They have white teeth.
Yeah.
They're buff. I don't think people were working out back then. I'm not sure that was a thing.
If you're pulling in fishnets, maybe, I don't know. But in one scene, Jesus did say, not too shabby. Like, that came out of Jesus's mouth. And I'm like, was that phrase around? And so
well, to be fair, they were speaking, Koine Greek, not necessarily English. So I guess there's some latitude there.
So it's but I like the fact that they're like, hey, here's a different business model.
Yeah.
And the more you slide this pay it forward thing, then it's like, oh, you get an early access to season 2. And if you go all the way to the right, then like they'll make breakfast for you. But it's a whole pay it forward kind of thing. And I was like, very interesting.
That's
so
interesting. We do have a question out there in the chat room if you want to.
From the Bow Hunter. Which one do you see? Yeah,
that's the one I see.
I'm looking to upgrade mics. Currently using the Blue Snowball. With it, there you go. Cringe. That's definitely that's not good.
Not bad if you get it right close to you.
Yeah. I saw the Audio Technica 2005. Is that the right one? Is that the 2100s?
AT 2005. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I only have USB hookups right now. Any thoughts? Yeah, that's a good one. That's basically the Samson Q2U, which is still in my backpack. The ATR 2100 and the AT 2005 are very similar. The 2005 was just like the cool version of the 2100. It was black. It had a bigger on-off switch. But yeah, that's definitely
on-off switch, which I think, and not as easy to. On these 2100s, that switch kind of sticks out, and it's easier to, accidentally click on it and turn off your mic. Now, not a big deal. You can turn it back on. But I've had a few folks who I've been doing sound checks on these things. When we used to send them to people, and then, they'd be talking, their mouth would be moving, you couldn't hear them, and I'd be like, oh, turn on your mic, And so the 2005 has a flat on-off switch, pretty nice. I do recommend, Dave. I mean, I don't mind straight USB on these things, but for $50 you can get that M Audio. What do we call those things? Sound.
It's a USB interface.
Yeah, and plug them in XLR, and I think if you I think $50 is pretty affordable. The M Audio ones are good enough. The thing I like about them is you get you really get a headphone amplifier on the way back. When you're USB into the back of these things, it's a terrible experience. People who don't know how bad it is have never heard it a good way. And they're like, oh, it's fine, but it's bad. I think USB monitoring is bad.
Yeah, the thing I like, because we differ on that opinion. I don't hear a whole lot of difference, but I will say the 2100 headphone experience is a bummer because their volume knob is crazy. The Samson Q2U I like because their volume is on the top of the microphone. So that I don't mind. I need to test this. I need to go in USB and then go in.
Oh, it's not a great. It's just muffled, like on all those mics. The USB, if you plug your headset into the back of them, it's just muffled. And I think you can go into the PC or the Mac and adjust some sound settings or something. But I don't want to. Like, I want a knob. And so for me, it's just worth it to have a headphone amplifier on a device, so you hear exactly what the mic sounds like. So that M Audio is a way to do it. You got the PreSonus or the Focusrite and step up, Mo 2 a step up above that. So you've got some options, and for $50, I think Behringer's got one for $75. So you got some choices in there. Audio interface is the word I was looking for earlier. So that'd be my recommendation.
And I forgot to mention that if you're listening to us on Clubhouse, which they're not, we have nobody in Clubhouse right now, you could raise your hand. If you're watching via live, you can go to, there we go, the M Audio M-Track Solo. If you want to jump into the video and ask your question, you can go to askthepodcastcoach.com/join. Or if you're listening, well, anybody that can hear this is already here. askthepodcastcoach.com/live. And you can ask your question via chat, just like Sean did, which is very cool. So yeah, that's the snowball, like Jim said, is you have to set that. I think it like the Yeti has different pickup patterns. And I've had people that if you get that thing on a stand and get it right in front of you, you can get a better sound out of it. If for some reason you can't get that. I did get a note from my Sweetwater sales guy, and he said, hey, you might want to put the word out that, and you kind of, it's always interesting when you get it from your sales guy, you go, really? Or is this just, but he was politely saying that he sees shortages on the horizon.
Oh, there's a shocker.
Yeah. And I was
microphone. Now they're inventing artificial shortages for stuff. Yeah. I think we're running short on air.
Yeah. So I was like, we'll see.
My gosh.
Elaine says, I disconnected my stuff to take on a trip, and now Audacity doesn't play back through my Zoom PodTrack P4. How can I fix it? In Audacity, when you set it up, there is a thing there that says, hey, this is my microphone, and this is my this is what I'm listening through. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here real quick. And so here you have this little picture of, it would help if I finish sharing my screen. So this is in the upper left-hand corner of Audacity. You'll see a little picture of a microphone, and you can see mine is set to a Rode caster. And then over here, a little bit in the middle of the screen, if you're in Audacity, you'll see a little picture of a speaker. And this is basically saying, this is my input. That's the little microphone. And the little speaker is what's my output. So for some reason that it's not coming through the P4, you would want to, make sure your P4 is selected next to that little speaker. And then you could plug your headphones into that, and you should be able to hear it. So
sometimes on Windows, if you're a Windows person, and if you've replugged it in via USB to a different USB port, a physical different port, sometimes it'll think it's a new device of some kind. And so Audacity may have lost that mapping. So just go in, like Dave said, just go into Audacity, drop that down. If you don't see it there, it's not connecting properly. Just check your cables, make sure all those things are kind of plugged in, and then of course restart your computer. If you haven't done that yet, sometimes connecting and disconnecting USB cables can cause Windows to kind of just stop in that area. And so a quick restart may help you out.
Yeah, Jason in the chat room is saying he also got an email from Sweetwater. So speaking of Sweetwater, if you go to supportthisShow.com/Sweetwater, that is my affiliate link. And if you feel like buying stuff, it's highly appreciated. But
I imagine Gary says they also mentioned the price increase. I would imagine, I think the numbers for May were like 5% inflation here in the United States, which for a month, 5% in a month is severe. Like, it's a lot. That's the most we've seen in a while. I think if you're on the fence about buying some equipment and you have the cash, I wouldn't borrow for this for sure, but you have the cash, now would probably be a good time to, if you can find it, to pick up gear you've been waiting on. I just don't, things aren't getting cheaper, and I don't think you're gonna, with short supply in certain areas, you're not gonna find. It's not like they have an overstock of things and
Right.
prices are going down. So I don't normally recommend, that, but I think just with the situation we're in, if you were holding out for something, you might want to pick it up just as soon as you can.
Yeah, if you didn't pick it up via Prime Day,
Yeah.
uh,
Did
this,
you pick up anything on
I
Prime?
was in Texas. I totally missed the whole
Um,
thing. It was like I got the occasional email from Daniel about some things that went down, and but all in all, I missed the whole thing. How about you? Did you pick up anything?
no, nothing. I didn't. It just wasn't I'm just not in the market for anything at the moment. I kind of have
That's it.
everything I need. We're just in a spot where things are good, and I like my setup. I know that sounds weird. We're supposed to always be working on something, but no, that just hasn't been. Wasn't. I saw the deals come through, and I'm sure there were some great ones. In fact, chat room, if you saw some great deals on podcasting gear, drop it in the chat room so we can highlight it.
Yeah, I had someone at the conference ask me, they're like, have you ever thought of upgrading to an SM7B? And I go, I've played with one in a conference and I put the headphones on and talked into it and my wallet started to get really, really hot and I just backed away from the microphone. But all in all, I'm pretty happy with how I sound in the microphone. I like this one because there's not much of a proximity effect, which means the closer I get to the microphone, it doesn't change the tone. And SM7Bs are not cheap, and even the whatever it is, the Shure MV7, their kind of USB version. And I just was like, if you're happy with your gear, don't worry about upgrading and things like that. But
Now would be a really good time to be happy with your gear, because I,
yeah,
I I think we're just going to go through a period over the next couple years where things are going to get kind of expensive and hard to find, and some of those kinds of pieces, and that'll eventually correct itself. But it would be a good time I think now is a good time to focus on your craft. Like, get in there, get good at what you're doing, get some serious audience feedback. We're moving into the new studio at Gallup. So I've been talking about this for a year because it's been done for a year, but with COVID, we weren't back. They'd made some mistakes when they built it. So I went in. So all this week, I went in a couple times and had to get PCs reimaged, because if a on our network, if a computer's off the network for a certain time period, it gets kind of kicked off and then it can't get back on. So the PC guys, our tech support guys, had to rebuild those images. So I got some work to do there. Installed my quad monitor. I've got a 4 monitor setup in there. Installed those to get those set up, and then we have new panels coming. So I have these big 6-foot panels that have Gallup, on the thing, and those get installed on Monday. And so we'll do some next week. I'll start doing some sound checks and go back into the studio there, and it's super quiet. They soundproofed it. I've got soundproofing on the inside of it. I mean, they really have done. I have an on-air light that I can flip on and people around. It doesn't matter. It's soundproof, so we're in good shape. So some cool. Like, I'm kind of, for the first time, looking forward to settling in at work and just doing some more podcasting from the Gallup studios again, which I haven't been that excited about for the last year, but I'm getting pretty pumped about getting back. So I think it's a good time to kind of settle in and just do your craft for a while.
that's it. Kyle, he says, hey, I borrowed a PR40. I don't have the jingle. Sorry, kids. And connected it to my mixer, but I sound tinny. He goes, my ATR 2100 sounds good. What is the difference? What is different about the PR40? Is there something more you need to do? Well, I know it's more gain hungry. But if it's actually affecting the tone, no, the PR40 doesn't need it. You think it would, because you have to jack up the gain so much. I would try the old unplug it and plug it back in, because if it's affecting the tone, I would think maybe it's not that's a weird one.
Blow on it.
Yeah.
Like you used to have to do for those video games.
Electronics, yeah.
And then tap it, put a pencil on the side. Maybe. No, was it in Kyle, was it all the channels? Did you run that across?
Yeah.
I mean, you could have a bad preamp,
Well, that's it. Again, it's we have a demon possessed CD player at my church that can't figure out if it wants to work or not. And we thought we had figured it out because it worked one Sunday and then it quit again. And we're like, these things sat here for a year and a half doing nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
So
and dust is surprisingly hard on mixers. Like that's
yeah,
and some of those. I mean, just as we're talking about mixers, you got a mixer sitting there. It's had dust falling into it now for the last year and a half, and the very first time you run that slide, and it's like
yeah.
you blow those out, right? Get some air in there and get those things kind of cleaned out because it's going to be a little scratchy.
That's weird. He says that he changed channels. Still sounds weird, but it sounds okay on my Zoom H4.
Huh. Must be something with the preamps, you would think, right?
That's a
Mackie mixer. I mean, in fact that a 2100 would work, but the
Yeah.
40 wouldn't. I'm assuming same cables.
yeah.
So, start troubleshooting everything, start eliminating things.
See, that's weird because I would start to say, it's got to be the PR40, but it sounds good on his other device, and that's when you're like,
Where's Mike Phillips when you need him, right? Remember Mike? I
Mike
haven't seen
Phillips.
him. Remember?
Yeah,
I haven't seen him in forever.
man, that's a voice
Blast
from the
from the
past.
past.
Oh, wow. That's because he knew, man,
Oh,
he could go in. I remember when the 2100 came out and the Q2U, and he was digging apart.
He single-handedly sold everybody on the ATR 2100. Like
Yeah.
he was the very first, I think, the very first one to say 21. I mean, I bought one because he said so.
Yeah.
And they Audio Technica. Hopefully he made something off of that because he made that mic something, and it just spread like wildfire.
Yeah, I think if I were to guess why Mike isn't around as much as he used to be, I think he got like when the marketing people started to show up.
Mm-hmm.
He was the one that's like, another snake oil salesman. He was always kind of on beating that drum, and I was like, I don't know. I know he had a radio show. I know he had a podcast. So
Yeah,
it'll be the new the game for children. Where in the world is Mike Phillips?
yeah. I just haven't seen him. I think those were the Blab days too.
Yeah.
When we were doing all that stuff, I just haven't seen him. Haven't seen a lot of those guys from that era for a while. So just could be the bubbles separated, for a while. They could still out there be doing a ton of great stuff.
Yeah. We have, I did find a couple questions here, and it's interesting because I did this yesterday. So now I don't remember what this means. I think we did this last week. Yes, we did do that last week. Okay. Here's a wide open question. And I was like, this might be something fun for Ask the Podcast Coach. How do you get your creative juices flowing when you feel stuck? And I was like, there's something we haven't talked about.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good question, and I think it's different for everybody. I mean, I know folks who put headphones on and just blare music, right? Like rock and roll, crazy, whatever, inspirational, that just kind of gets them all pumped up. Right. I know folks who do the opposite, right? They go mellow, or they go into full sound isolation. So that's one way, what's sound, music, what's going on around you. Yeah, so that'd be one way.
That's why a lot of people, for me, I get a lot of great ideas in the shower because your brain just kind of shuts off. It's just, you're just more focused on, okay, I don't want to drown in here. That's really all you got to worry about.
Same thing on a flight though, right? You can't do it. There's not a lot else you can do. I'm super creative on a flight.
Here, that's so that's one. If I'm stuck on I don't know what to talk about, that's where I will start looking at books. I'll go out to blogs, where normally I just focus on whoever I'm talking to and what I'm seeing and things like that. But if I'm really don't know. So I will look at other people in some cases for inspiration and see what they're doing. And like the thing with that app I was talking about with the pay it forward, I was like, all right, let's write that down. Let's dig into it later. This might be something I could bring in. So I have a lot of stuff in Evernote that are you might, if I dump some water on this, it might grow into a real idea kind of thing. Gator says the shower is a great deliberation room. And Dan is saying one way he likes to get his creative juices flowing is to step away. Yep. Go for a walk, remove screens for a while, and then come back with fresh eyes. That is great, especially if you're trying to, Kyle, when it comes to troubleshooting, when I was in the copier world, there was a guy that was like the closer. If nobody could get a machine fixed, you sent in Rick Plant, and Rick would come in, and there are times, and he would look everything over and he'd test things, and for some reason, nothing jumped out really obvious. he'd be like, all right, time for a cigarette. And I'm like, yeah, but we're here to fix the machine. He goes, just trust me, I need a cigarette. So he'd go out, smoke a cigarette, chill out, come back in, and now he's not staring at them. He's coming back with a fresh set of eyes.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, he would like walk over and go, oh, you know what it is? This is Unplugged. Click. And he says, Gator says, I take walks with my wife. That's always good, even when you're not in a creative juice of deficit. She usually has an outside looking in. Yep, there you go. Different perspective. And she usually has great ideas because I'm too close to it. That is, again, I think so many times we're way too close to it. So, and he says she's my associate producer. There you go. Give her, and she gets as much money. And make sure to put that at the end of the credits. I did see that. If you, again, going back to this Chosen thing, if you slide the slider way over and you're paying big bucks, you can be in season 3 credits. So that is a little bit, I see people do that in Patreon. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else I do. But yeah, it's I either dive into my audience or the opposite. I just step back, or sometimes I'll get inspiration from something else or whatever I'm looking at. Is there something here that would apply to podcasting or, things of that nature? So
sometimes asking somebody who's totally outside of the space and say, hey, I got this thing. I know you don't know anything about it, but I'm going to ask you a question. And just seeing it, it's the same effect of, going outside for a break and coming back in, of asking someone who doesn't have a vested interest. We got a question about microphones. We immediately say, oh, Q2U 2100, right? 2005. Right. But there's probably, Blue makes I think it's an M100 or something. That's a pretty good mic. Why don't we it's 100 in the same price range, does the exact same thing. Why don't we recommend that? Because we're in our bubble, right? And so getting out of that bubble and asking someone else, hey, what do you think, can be really, really helpful. Find somebody who doesn't know anything about casting, and ask them some questions. There we go.
I'm glad you did that, because that's a great example of an edit that I will leave in. And I realized when I was interviewing my last episode, I interviewed Adam Curry, and I went to say things, and I said kings. It was kind of like kings. And I was like, and I was like, do I go back? I could replace that word. And I was like, what are you worried about? Like, nobody even noticed it. Quit obsessing over stuff. Because I did talk to people this week that were spending like 5 and 6 hours on a 20-minute episode for editing. And I'm like, yeah, you have the scalpel out. Go back to the rubber mallet and smack the easy things, but don't go crazy on that kind of stuff. Craig over at Ingleus podcast. Every so often I sit down with my co-host over a beer.
Yeah.
There you go. And brainstorm.
It's a good, if you're not a smoker, beer is the next
yeah,
thing.
That's it. Yeah.
Looks like we fixed the lanes problem too.
Did we? Yeah. Switch the USB ports on the computer, picked up the Zoom, but need to restart. Yeah. When in doubt, reboot. Turn on the Zoom before I opened Audacity and Bingo. There we go. Yay. We've, our work here is done. So, Kyle says there are little Zoom mics, the ZDM1. Are they any good?
Are there any good cheap mics?
Oh,
yeah.
We had this
pay for, right?
We had, and that's the answer we got. We had that question. Somebody said, hey, at the conference, they and the biggest problem is my guest. If I'm doing interviews, my guests sound like crap. And they're like, is there any like $20 microphone? And there was a headset, I guess, that people were recommending, but it makes women sound horrendous, unfortunately, because there's apparently it's just makes them sound shrill. And so that's where we all kind of went Q2U. Yeah. Like, it's just like, and then there was one guy that's going to buy 2 Q2Us and do the thing that you used to do and put in a label to send it to the next guest. So it would take a lot of planning, and he'd have 2 and, all this stuff and a lot of foam packaging. And I said, be sure to tell them to unplug before you put it in the box. Unplug all cables. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So we broke a handful of those that way. That would be a great method, except we had some folks who just held on to them forever. And then you call them like 3 weeks later and you're like, hey, can you send that mic? Oh, you wanted me to send it? yeah, we wanted you to send it. Can you, I mean, we had these instructions. It was really
Right.
clear, send it back to us. Here's a return label.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then 2 weeks later, I mean, they just didn't care. They were like,
Right.
I'm too busy. Yeah, I'm too busy to breathe today. I just can't. I am so busy. There's like, that we kind of quit. I mean, we broke a bunch of mics and we had trouble getting some of them back. And I just kind of said, I'd almost rather have crappy audio,
Well,
than dealing with that.
And what some people were saying, and I definitely get this point, I don't know that most people can say this, and that is if you get them online, especially if you don't know them, like, hey, can you either send me a link to where you've been interviewed in the past? In other words, I want to hear what kind of sound you have. And if they have bad sound, you go, no. Yeah. You have to go buy a microphone. And they were kind of saying, like, again, there were a lot of publishers in here, and they're like, look, if you're an author, invest $70 in a microphone if you want to promote your book. It's like, it's part of the deal, part of promotion, write it off as a tax thing or whatever. But Sean has some good news. He says, hey, I just purchased the Audio Technica 2005. It'll be here Wednesday. So very cool. Yeah, it's a good one. So Gator says, that's the mic I use, the Bowhunters, and it really works well. Using dynamics, you need to find that sweet spot to talk. But from what he's really happy with it. So
Go back to Mike Dell's comment.
Mike Dell is in the house.
He says $19, not a bad mic. Notice he doesn't say it's a good mic. It's just not bad.
And Mike has a doppelganger. I literally, when I walked into NRB, it looked like Mike with about 30 more pounds on him. But I walk in, I'm like, why is Mike Dell like moderating a panel at NRB? I'm like, well, because he's Mike Dell. Of course he is. And then I looked and I was like, no, that's not Mike. And if it is, he had the COVID-19 was more like the COVID like 40. I was like, holy cow. But yeah. So Gabrielle says that might change my life. So yeah, it's a good, all those are good mics. And once you get the good mic, check that bad boy off the list. Like I said, people occasionally go, why don't you have an SM7B mic? Because I've checked it off the list. The mic is done. I'm happy with the one I have, and we are good to go. Mike says, I haven't left Michigan in 19 months. So
we know exactly where you are, Mike Dell. We know where you live.
And I think we all have one of these. Gabrielle says, I have a graveyard of mics starting at 2010. What should I do with them? It's called eBay or Facebook Marketplace.
If they're broken, though,
if they're broken,
take them to Best Buy or one of those places, and they'll recycle them for you.
Yeah, but
just clear them out.
That is on my list of like, sell your stuff before it becomes completely worthless.
Well, okay, hold on. I normally agree with you, Dave, and we'll do our awesome supporters here in just a second. But with the way prices are going on things and the way chip shortages are right now, like, you might want to reconsider that. So depending on what it is, and this would be for everybody, now might be the time to clear out your old technology, because people are having a hard time finding it, and you probably get top dollar for it if you do it right. So this is the one time I'd recommend it. Normally I'm just like, just recycle it. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
But in this case, if it's working, maybe it's worth it to get it on there and get it sold.
I remember when I had an apartment, and my brother said, you do realize you have a mixer in every room of your house? Because I had old ones from bands and stuff. He goes, every time I go into a room, it's like, oh, there's a mixer in the corner. I'm like, yeah, that's just, I don't know what to do with them. So on. I guess I could give them to an awesome supporter if they need one. Our awesome supporters, you can find them over at, and I'm sorry, Jim, I'm leaving you hanging.
No, that's okay. I can make my own. I'll make my own sound.
That's good, because I was like, wow, that's a really good coffee. It sounds just like you're pouring coffee. Well done. So we're talking about awesome people like James over at the Dog Podcast Network. If you have a little doggy, people are bringing their dogs on planes now. They're like little things you stick in their feet stick through. And I was like, I'm seeing much more of that. But those people need to be listening to James over the Dog Podcast Network. If you have a little four-legged friend there, he's got all sorts of short shows, long shows, all sorts of shows. If you love dogs, check out the Dog Podcast Network. And then we always thank our $20 supporters, people like Ed Sullivan over at SonicCupcake.com. Brock over at Occupied Podcast. So if you're into occupational therapy, check him out, occupiedpodcast.com. Kim over at Toastmasters101.net. So if you want to improve your speaking and your editing time and things that, boost your content, Toastmasters101.net. Max Trescott up in the air at aviationnewstalk.com. So if you like all things flying and planes and pilot kind of stuff, check him out, aviationnewstalk.com. Felix over at the Latin Podcast Awards, which is dedicated to enhancing the visibility of Latinx podcasts around the world. They've been around since 2017, so they're coming up on 5 years. Find him at latinpodcastawards.com. Shane over at spybrary.com. So if you like all things espionage, check out spybrary.com. Glenn the Geek Hebert over at horseradionetwork.com. If you have horses and like horses, they have, I think, 17 different shows about horses over at the Horse Radio Network.
A road trip, right? Isn't he doing a road trip?
Doing a road trip. And it's funny because he asked, hey, do you want me to send in like clips from the road? And I can't wait to hear these because I'm thinking he's running into internet problems because he offered to do that and I haven't received a single one.
And maybe he just got busy. But yeah, those would be great to have.
Yeah, but I'm sure he's going to have plenty of tales from the road. Greg over at Debt Shepherd, where he's teaching financial wellness. So if you want to get a little better grasp on your money, check him out, debtshepherd.com. Greg over at Indie Drop-In. If you've got a true crime or a comedy or a scary story, he has an audience that's looking for your stuff. You go over to indiedropin.com and send him your episode, and he will put it out in front of his audience. Michael Delaney over at Baby Mountain Radio Productions, where podcasting and hard work are made fun. Find him over at babymountainradio.com. And if you'd like to be an awesome supporter, go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. That's also where you can see our $10 supporters. And if you're like, well, I don't really want to do the monthly thing, go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/store. There are all sorts of ways over there to donate. You can buy my book. You can sponsor Jim's mug, all sorts of stuff. Askthepodcastcoach.com/store. So thanks for everyone for doing that. And let's see. Here is one. Oh, it's interesting. It says advertisers. And I'm like, great. And then apparently I forgot to copy and paste whatever the question was. So here's the question I get all the time on advertisers, where it's an oldie but a goodie. We'll bring it back. How many downloads do I need to get an advertiser? And the answer is, as always, with every podcast question, it depends. It really does. I love the example of the guy I had on a couple months ago that does a show for, speaking of dogs, about dog walkers, pet sitters and things like that. And he got a sponsor, even though he doesn't have, whatever it is, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 downloads per episode after 30 days. He's nowhere near that, but he got a sponsor because somebody makes software for dog sitters and he has their exact audience. And they were like, hey, we want to pay you money to get in front of your people. So it really does depend. And I always say sponsorship typically for like 90% of, podcasters, if you're trying to do the whole downloads per episode kind of thing, it doesn't work. So we do have a question from, this is great. Jason says, Manscaped approached me about what appeared to be a cold email, exact same email, 1 month apart. Yeah, that makes you feel warm and special. Hey, you're swell. We love your podcast. And then a month later, hey, you're swell. We love your podcast. We do have somebody's chiming in here from Facebook. Can you explain a little bit about sound characteristics? Dave, your voice is more crisp and Jim is different, more soft and boomy. 2 different mics would be the first one for that. I tend to turn the volume up to hear Jim, and the same volume level, Dave's voice would come through too strong for me. I can hear a difference, but I don't know the terms or how to manage those qualities in an interview. Well, there are 2 ways to make things more clear. I could turn up the treble, or I could turn down the bass. So as I look at my meters on the Rodecaster, I'm going up to about -18, which is kind of weird because that particular metering system, I would not say is the most helpful thing most accurate thing. Jim, if you tell me what you had for breakfast.
I had some yummy granola.
Okay, so Jim was a little quiet. I've turned him up a little more, and that's just because I'm so used to doing this. I didn't even check my meters before we started. But yeah, Jim always is, and I'm not sure why, because you're not really eating the mic. But you, when I listen to this back, you're always much more bassier than I am, and there's nothing you can do about that. You're not going through a mixer where you're boosting the bass.
No, and Ed and I talk about this all the time. When I meet with Ed every Sunday, and we chat about it. It is a characteristic of StreamYard too, in that what we're sending through. I think there's also a difference, Dave, when you produce the podcast. You do some things like you don't use StreamYard's audio, right? You use local audio to do it. Is that right? When you're for the audio that goes into the podcast feed, what do you do?
Yeah, I take the stuff from the Rodecaster. If I'm using the stuff from StreamYard, it's because Dave forgot to press record.
Yeah, well, and it's a good backup.
Yeah,
my voice is lower than yours.
Yeah,
right. I mean,
I'd have to talk like this to sound like Jim.
It just is. And then I think the 2100 that I use has a different audio dynamic than the RE20 or 320 that you're using, and you do have kind of a crisper, higher that I think that brings in a different audio quality than what I'm getting. I am concerned about the audio volume though. Like you and I should on StreamYard, you and I should be should be similar volumes. It tries to balance that out. Now, maybe because I'm bassier, I'm a little bit quieter than you. I don't know. I'd love to hear from others in the chat room. Am I typically always quieter than Dave when we do this? Just some of your thoughts out there in the chat room.
Because I know in the past when I do this, I always notice that you're just more bassy, and I was like, okay. But volume wise, we're usually pretty close to the point where if I throw a compressor on it, we're good. On occasion, I will use separate tracks and, maybe EQ some of your bass out. But most of the time I'm like, because it's one of those things where there's, again, you can go as deep as you want with some of this stuff. I'm like, is that listenable? Is that going to be so annoying that it's going to make people tune out? And I'm like, I am most of the time like, yeah, that's fine. It's really not that big a deal, but maybe it is.
Does Facebook get the same feed that YouTube gets? Is that all coming from StreamYard?
Yeah,
so it's not a different feed there.
Yeah. So, but it is tricky. Yeah. Miss Eileen says, by the way, Miss Eileen, congrats on it's a lot. 2,000. It's not 2 million, 2,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel.
Oh, nice.
It might be 2 million. It's Miss Eileen. I mean, everybody loves Miss Eileen.
2 million's a lot, Dave. I mean, that's a lot. Maybe 20,000. Miss Eileen, put how many you have in there.
I just saw a thing on her. She was like, congratulations she got a lot of subscribers.
Nice.
So 2 million views. I knew it was a million.
Good.
Yeah. So
I saw one with YouTube's gotten ridiculous. I saw one the other day. I had like 147 million views, and I remember when we celebrated 1 million. So it's gotten pretty crazy. Miss Eileen also says Facebook adds compression. So maybe as we're going out to Facebook, we're getting compression. I send it to the School of Podcasting private Facebook page. So that's it. It goes out to YouTube, and it goes out to the School of Podcasting members. And then I actually did a presentation on this yesterday, a behind the scenes of Ask the Podcast Coach, because it is interesting. Because when I get done, it's interesting because I basically make two different podcasts. One is the 90-minute version without the coffee pour and without the awesome supporters. And the thing that really messes it up, and I've figured this out, is I put in chapter markers in Hindenburg. And unless you select every channel when you delete something, your chapters don't follow you. So you then have to redrag that. So I figured that out. And I've also found out if I go in, and I've been trying to remember today to put in markers, then when you delete stuff, the markers stick with that. So I do that. And then in YouTube, I go in, I download the full version of the YouTube channel. So there's the 90 minutes. Then I go into the original one that was 90 minutes and trim it down to 60 minutes. Now, why do I do that? Because that's the one that's already got a bunch of views. It's got a bunch of likes, right? Chat room. It's got a bunch of likes. And so that's some stuff too that I do behind the scenes though. Yeah.
Anyway, but 2 million views is huge.
Well, yeah, oh, it's gigantic. I mean, 2 million of anything is a pretty big deal. Dave, I think the RE320 is a little higher too. Like, I mean, I don't know if our voices are that different. I think the 2100 naturally puts a little more bass out, and then for whatever reason, your 320 is a little crunchier, a little higher, little. It's different. It's weird because your sound here is different than when you do school podcasting.
Which is weird because it's the same. Like
I know. I'm always trying to figure out. Ed and I are always trying to figure out why live. Do you know?
Probably because when on the School of Podcasting, I run this through Shep's Omni channel, primarily for the noise gates.
Okay.
And I add a hint of bass and a hint of top end on that.
Yeah, because it's super clear on School of Podcasting. It's super clear, but we get a little bit of just kind of high end crunchy on when you're live. Just when you're live.
Well, maybe I need to.
It's not terrible, but it's noticeable at times. You know, you're kind of like, oh, that's interesting. So we've always kind of thought like maybe you're running it, you got an effect that you're running just live, or you're running it through another piece of equipment that's just live.
No.
And listen, we are literally splitting hairs about sound. Like, we need to bring Chris Curran in here and he'll be like, well, 21.7 megahertz or 21.6 megahertz. What's this play at?
Something's going weird. Yeah.
Well, anyways, okay.
We did have another question here. I picked this up in Facebook. This is Andy says, and I thought this would be great for you. What's everyone's thoughts on having a break, possibly seasons in their podcast? We've done a weekly podcast for about a year now without having a break, even adding the odd extra episode here and there. We've seen a big fall in listeners over the last 3 to 4 months. And although I think our sound and content has improved, it doesn't seem reflective in the listeners. Is it worth having a break and launching, he says in quotation marks again, after a few weeks? Be interesting to know what you all think. So I'll let you go first, Jim.
If you need a break, take one. If you don't, keep going. You know, it's just do what works, do what keeps you sane. I think sometimes we think too much about the listener. We get all psyched out about, oh, if I'm gone for 2 weeks or 2 months, they're going to, go listen to something else. Yeah, they probably will. They're going to move on. You've left them. They're going to move on. Will you get them back? Maybe. It's a very good possibility. But if you need a break, take one. I don't know if a break is a strategy. Like, I don't know if you're like, okay, here's how we're going to grow our audience. We're going to take a break. Like, I don't know, we're on, we did 6 seasons of Theme Thursday for Gallup. And then the resource, Micah, who my co-host for that, just got really busy. And so we stopped doing it. And I'm continuing to load that channel with highlights. Every week they get a 3-minute, which is what they really wanted anyways. They wanted shorter, not longer. So we started loading that channel with highlights. We set records doing it that way, and we're not producing on a weekly basis. That's a way to do a break. So a break as a strategy, probably a bad idea. If you need to take a break, probably a good idea to get one taken. I don't know, Dave, what do you think?
Well, for me, the whole seasons thing wasn't created for Joe Podcaster doing Batman in the basement. It was created for Serial, who has a team of 18 and is taking 18 months to create 9 episodes. Those people need a break because there's a lot of research and things like that. And so, but I'm with you. If you need a break, take a break, because I am starting to hear stories of people that, like, physically it takes a toll on your health because you're stressed out so much about your podcast. And I'm like, no. And all you have to do is say, again, if you let your audience know, hey, I have some things going on in my life right now and I need to take care of, and I appreciate you as always for being a listener. I will be back on this date and we will pick it up from there. But right now I need some time to take care of some things in my life. I don't know anybody that's like, oh, forget it. I'm going to unsubscribe. Now they might go listen to somebody else, but I don't think they're going to unsubscribe, and they'll probably come back. But don't.
And if they do, are they really that engaged?
That's true. That's a good point.
let's not get, let's not get crazy about this thing. It's just take a break. And if you need one, take it. If you've got content you can put in there instead, do it. But
Yeah.
if you got to take care of yourself first. Your
Bingo.
audience can come later.
Yeah. Craig says, I'm thinking of moving from weekly to every 2 weeks just for the summer, but he's concerned about losing his audience. I think
you're going to lose some audience doing that. You are, but that's okay. They probably weren't that engaged anyways. Like, let them go. If they come back, then that's not the right analogy. But but I think it, let them go, and you need to refresh, right? You need some time to refresh.
Yeah, Mike is saying you could always do reruns. Yeah. Not a bad idea. That could be interesting. Daniel is saying not podcasting is taking a toll on his health. But he's got the right.
He'll be back.
Yeah, his priorities are
he'll be back. That little one will get a little bit bigger, and then there'll be some time, maybe again, to jump back in there.
Yeah, and then someone in the chat room says, batch, record a bunch as long as they're quality. That's my whole thing. And that's the thing you want to avoid is like, well, I know it's Thursday. I don't know what I'm going to talk about, but I said I'd do it. That's that. When I hear that, I hit stop immediately because somebody's about to waste 20 minutes of my life.
Yeah, you've run out of things to talk about, and you're like, okay, don't admit that. Just get in there, or just don't do it.
Yeah.
Like take a week off. I took this week off. From Home Gadget Geeks. I had a friend in town, and it was great just to be like, last night I was a little lost because Friday nights are my, editing night. I spent an hour or two getting it edited and moved around and all that other stuff. And I have found, we've talked about this on the show, I found breaking up my process over the weekend has made it much more manageable. So, record on Thursday nights, edit the audio and video on Friday nights, publish, write the show notes, and publish Saturday. I do part of it Saturday morning, the next part of it while I'm listening to another podcast. For me, breaking up that process rather than one long marathon, gotta get this done, and then you hate it. By the time you're done, you just hate it. You're like, I don't want to even see this thing anymore, not even my peripheral. So, you're just like, get it out of there. So I have found that's worked really well for me.
Yeah, Dan says, I went from weekly to a whenever schedule, and he said, really no audience change. Consistency doesn't always mean the same day of the week of the month. Yeah, when he doesn't do it anymore, I think it's safe to say that Ray has pod-faded the Podcasters Studio. That's the one he did before he did Podcasters Roundtable. And Ray was on a very, whenever I find something good to talk about, I will talk about it schedule. And I didn't mind at all because I knew when I saw one come down my in my app, I was like, ooh, Ray's got something to say. And that was actually meant I was going to go and, click play on that first because I knew he had something to say versus, I wonder if this episode is going to be any good. So Mike Dell says, I am the king of inconsistent. The other thing you want to do if you do take a break, because you've done the right thing and you've announced it, is when you come back, do not apologize for being gone. Just say, hey, I'm back. I see a lot of people, and I understand that. I think it's sweet and it's honorable that you feel bad that you've kind of, left your audience. But I see people that will literally spend 5 minutes apologizing, and they're like, grandma died, and then this, and they're like
busy. I would crazy busy. How often do you, like, we're all crazy busy. Like, stop using that term. We're all crazy busy, drives. Oh, I'm super crazy. Yeah, everybody is. Just relax. If you need to take the week off, Dave, I actually have had listeners thank me for taking time off because it gives them a chance to catch up.
And that's the thing.
I'm behind. Can you take a few weeks off? That's
the strategy. When you do take a break and you announce it, say, hey, I've got, 57 episodes to listen to. Go and check those out. Gator says, if you have good content, people will come back. If I miss a week, I get DMs about where's the show. If anything, they'll be more eager to hear the latest. I did that by accident. I had a bunch of podcast rodeo shows, and I had scheduled them out, and apparently I had 3 episodes less than I thought. I basically didn't post them, and so I had people say, hey, where's the show? And I was like, what do you mean, where's the show? I've been posting there. Like, nope, you haven't had an episode in like 2 weeks. And I was like, oh, oops. So that's really kind of good that you have somebody go, hey, like, what's up with the show? Are you killing it? And I was like, so I put one out, and then at the very end, I did say, hey, I might change the schedule of this. And I explained the Podcast Rodeo Show was a show that was one of my test shows, wasn't supposed to go on forever. I was testing Pinecast. It's okay as a host, not my top, but not there are worse. I did it to drive traffic to the Podcast Review Show, which it's failed at miserably. And it was supposed to be a quick show, and I kept adding more stuff to it. And I went, so here's what's going to happen. All that stuff that I added to it, yeah, we're going back to bare bones minimum. And I was thinking of doing it only if somebody paid me, but we'll see what happens with that. But and there will be a time, and that's one of the speakers at the conference had a thing about we keep adding more and more and more to our life. In the end, it's like, what is like the thing you're trying to do? And I was like, yeah, I got too many podcasts. Like if I really wanted to make the school of podcasting this shining beacon of podcasting, I was like, I'd have to whack a couple here just to get the extra 2 hours here, 4 hours there. And it's one of those things where I can jokingly say, because it's the truth, no wife, no kids. So I got more free time, but you can still give a lot of that away and go, so, what you going to do? But wow, holy cow. Look, I know
time goes fast, doesn't it?
So Jim, what is coming up on the averageguy.tv?
Yeah, I took the week off, so no new podcast. But you know what? I got a whole bunch of really good ones out there that you probably haven't heard as yet. One of our favorite hosts from a couple of weeks ago, I got a chance to be on his show. So Uncle Marv, who's in the chat room, I got a chance this week on Wednesday to do Podnuts Pro Live. So if you want to go out there and listen to that, or go to the averageguy.tv, Aaron Lawrence is always a good listen, so you can get that as well. But Uncle Marv, thanks for having me on. It was a ton of fun to talk about home automation and tech stuff. He's a great host. So Marv, thanks.
And on the School of Podcasting, here's the fun part. I know it's the second part of my interview with Joe Salsihai from Stacking Benjamins. And it's the part where Joe and I talk about something that's really important to podcasters that they should know. But because I did that interview like a month ago, I don't remember what part 2 is, but whatever it is, it's coming this week. Also in the future, I'm going to talk about, I had a really weird thing happen with the Adam Curry interview. And that is, as I was editing it, I really was like, ugh. And not that Adam was bad, but I really was like, this goes against a lot of what I teach in some ways. And what I mean by that is in some cases, Adam answered my question, but he didn't answer my question. And I've had more people say what a great interview that was. And it's really odd that I was like, not awful. And then I had like people all like, oh man, I'm listening to Kyle. Kyle wrecked his bike. He was listening to the interview and wasn't paying attention. I totally engulfed him. And so that might be something that I talk about in the future on the School of Podcasting, is the difference between interviewing another Joe podcaster and interviewing somebody who is seen as a celebrity. So that might be coming up in the future as well. But thanks to the chat room. Thanks to podcastbranding.co, and stick around for some post show.